The cold evening air of Delhi filled Neha Sharma's apartment, as she stood by the window, staring at the city below. The hustle of life carried on outside, but she felt a strange silence within her, a deep ache she could never seem to shake off. She was a widow, 2 years into her grief, and her life seemed to have frozen in time. Every day, she questioned herself, was this all life had left to offer me? Beneath her quiet exterior, there was an intense longing, an unspoken desire for something more, something deeper than just the mundane rituals of daily life. Neha's longing wasn't just emotional, it was physical. She wanted to feel something more than the hollow silence that surrounded her. But how could she reconcile this inner need with the guilt she felt? She had tried to ignore it, tried to suppress it, but it always came back with an intensity she couldn't control. Her heart, her mind, and her body were constantly in conflict, searching for solace, for release from the emptiness that had become her constant companion. Then, one evening, she met Ranjan. Ranjan wasn't like the others she had known. He wasn't just another man in a crowd. He had something about him, something raw, magnetic, and undeniably powerful. His eyes were deep, filled with a certain vulnerability and a fiery intensity that mirrored Neha's own desires. When their gazes met for the first time, it was as if time had frozen. It was as though he saw through her, and in that moment, she couldn't hide the yearning that had been buried inside her for so long. Ranjan was only a few years younger than her, but there was a maturity in him, a kind of strength that was both comforting and intoxicating. He carried himself with a quiet confidence, but there was an undercurrent of emotion in the way he spoke to her, as if he understood the weight of her grief, her loneliness, and her desires. "Would you like to spend some time with me?" Ranjan had asked one evening, his voice calm but carrying an invitation that Neha could not refuse. She knew this was an opportunity, one that she couldn't let slip by. Maybe it was the chance to finally feel something real, something passionate, something that would release her from this never-ending search. Neha hesitated, but only for a moment. She was tired of feeling trapped within her own body, within her own mind. She wanted to experience life again, in its rawest, most primal form. Her soul longed for connection, for intimacy, for someone who could make her feel alive again. That evening, as Ranjan arrived at her apartment, there was a strange stillness between them. The air was thick with unspoken tension, an attraction neither of them could ignore. He stood before her, his presence commanding and yet gentle. Slowly, he reached out, taking her hand in his. His fingers brushed against her skin, sending a shiver down her spine. Neha's heart raced, and she couldn't deny the pull she felt toward him. Her body responded to his touch in ways she hadn't allowed herself to feel in so long. "Do you feel this too?" Ranjan whispered softly, his breath warm against her ear. Neha's breath caught in her throat. She nodded, unable to speak, her body betraying her, wanting him in a way she didn't fully understand. It wasn't just his touch, it was the way he made her feel seen, wanted, desired. They sat down together, the silence between them heavy with anticipation. Ranjan's eyes never left hers as he slowly leaned in, his lips brushing against her cheek. A wave of heat surged through Neha, and for the first time in what felt like forever, she allowed herself to surrender to the moment. Her lips parted, and he kissed her softly, tentatively, as if he too were unsure of what this would become. But Neha didn't want to hesitate anymore. She wanted to feel this. She needed to feel this. As their kiss deepened, so did the intensity of their connection. Her hands found their way to his shoulders, pulling him closer, urging him to take more. She wanted to feel every inch of him, to lose herself in the sensations that were flooding her body. Ranjan responded eagerly, his hands tracing the curves of her body, as if memorizing the feel of her. Neha's mind was a whirlwind of emotions, desire, guilt, yearning, fear. She had wanted this, longed for it, but now that it was happening, she couldn't help but question herself. Was this really what she needed? Was this just a fleeting escape, or something more? Her body was alive with sensations, but her heart was caught in a storm of doubt. Ranjan's touch was both comforting and dangerous. Every kiss, every caress, every movement brought them closer, but Neha couldn't escape the nagging voice in her mind that asked, "What are you doing?" Was she using him to fill a void that nothing and no one could truly satisfy? The night unfolded slowly, each moment more intense than the last. Their connection was both physical and emotional, and yet, as the night drew to a close, Neha felt a strange emptiness creeping in. She had given herself to Ranjan, but did she feel complete? Or was this just another way to escape the loneliness that defined her? As they lay together, wrapped in the aftermath of their passion, Neha's mind raced. She had found physical satisfaction, but had she found emotional fulfillment? Was this the beginning of something deeper? Or was it just another momentary indulgence that would leave her feeling more lost than before? She turned to Ranjan, her heart heavy with the unspoken questions. He lay beside her, his arm around her waist, but there was a distance in his eyes that she couldn't ignore. "What happens now?" Neha asked softly, her voice barely a whisper. Ranjan paused, his eyes searching hers. "What do you want it to be?" he asked. Neha closed her eyes, feeling the weight of his question. She didn't have the answer, not yet, but for the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, she could find something more in this connection. Something that wasn't just physical, but real.